So I've been fighting something the last couple days. So my voice is a bit raspy at the moment. Last week was a trying week, I'll be honest. And then by Sunday night, I was just exhausted.
Yeah.
And this always happens. Like kind of when I push myself to a certain point, I'll come down with something minor or whatever.
Well,
But
your body loses some ability to fight off some minor
exactly.
colds, right? So,
Yeah.
and
So it
it's interesting because I was chatting with someone on Twitter, and they're like, "Why is it that going into a weekend I always get sick?" And it's like you sit there and push yourself and push yourself and push yourself, and you're like, "I've spent everything I had," and your body's like, "All right, I'm done.
yep.
I can't fight this cold." So it's no wonder that that tends to be the timing.
Yeah. And yeah, Saturday was just emotionally draining. We had the ALS walk in Philadelphia. So, a huge thank you to everyone who donated with the link that you shared out.
Yeah,
It was amazingly great and other emotions all at the same time. So yeah, by Sunday night I was spent.
yeah.
And so I woke up Monday fighting this. So, just another day or so I'll be over it. But yeah, it's like a little raspy at the moment.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm dragging a bit today too. Got up super early. I think there was a sound, or I thought I heard a sound. It's one of those things that's like you don't know if you dreamt it or you heard it and it crept into your dream, but I heard some
Mhm.
kind of sound and I thought, was it some breaking in the house? What's going on? And I was like jacked on adrenaline at like 4:30 this morning, and I just couldn't calm it down and go back to sleep. So I'm dragging a bit. I'm on my second coffee, which I just picked up a cold brewer based on John's recommendation, and I made my first batch yesterday. So um, I'm quite impressed with it.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. Have you ever had a cold brew?
Oh, I've had tons of cold brews.
Okay.
Never
It
made
just
it myself, so I am actually quite intrigued.
Yeah. It was so I bought a real compact version, the OXO compact cold brewer. And it brews about 16 ounces of concentrate,
Hmm.
um, which I think is probably enough for 5 or 6 drinks.
Okay.
And I let it brew for about 16 hours. And so it's you have to prep ahead of time. It's not something you're gonna create quickly, but it brews about 16 ounces. It came with a cool little glass jar with a stopper that you just put in the fridge and pull out 3 ounces or so when you're ready to make a beverage. It was super simple. I already had a grinder, and so it was super
Nice.
simple to get set up and make work. And the product was so incredibly smooth. Like, this is smooth coffee, and it really, at least with these beans that I picked up, like the fruity kind of profile of it really popped,
Hmm.
which tends to get overrun a bit if you do something like espresso. You tend to get like the darker chocolate kind of
Hmm.
notes with espresso, but this like is very like robust fruitiness. It's very interesting. So anyway,
Nice.
doing some cold brew right now.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully that puts some caffeine into the veins and helps power through the day. Anyway, um, I didn't even look at the topic, so I can't even help
Mhm.
set up any kind of segue or transition for you.
Um, yeah, no worries. So this came from a Twitter thread from early October. You, um, you had posted about a business world where autonomy at work is becoming the norm, but going back to what we've learned in school, kind of like everybody comply and to follow along in line. I'm overly paraphrasing your initial tweet, and one of the replies you got was, um, "How do you strike a balance between bringing creative solutions to the table without being perceived as a rule breaker?" So I'll put a link to the thread and that reply. So I kind of fleshed out this episode because the last couple episodes we've been talking about the concept of writing for the brand and being loyal and whatnot. And when I really thought about this question, it's a really great question in that if depending upon the culture of the organization, you could be seen as disloyal or a rule breaker when trying to challenge the norms of the organization. So because if you think about it, if we take it, 30,000 foot view and then really come into the topic, we live in a society where we're trained from childhood to get in line and stay there. Don't ask questions, don't question the teacher. This is the way things are done. And then so that kind of brings it, when you bring it forward into your work life, into your career, you run into those situations where when you question why a company does something, you're met with the get back in line, this is the way we've always done it kind of response. So, and those that challenge that norm and try to bring new ideas, new creative ways of doing things are labeled as rule breakers and problems. And there's a bit of double speak here when you think about it, because a lot of times in the same breath, those companies that are saying, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way it is. This is our culture. Don't get back in line. They are also in a very public way saying, they claim to want to work with people that are creative, that want to be innovative, but then they're quick to stifle it. So I do want to, initially tackle like, why is that? Why do companies in one vein say, we want creative people, we want new ideas, but then when people do bring it up, that they're squashed. But then how can someone bring new ideas or creative solutions to the table in a culture like that without risking being branded as a problem child?
Man, there's so many different directions that we can take this, and I that you tend to kick off these podcasts, and it scrambles my brain. I'm like, oh, I can go all down all these different paths. My 6-year-old is raging out, and so let's take it from your question as far as I think you said something like, why do companies say they want creative thinkers, but then they stifle that creativity? Uh, I think it happens for probably two primary reasons, and we see this more in larger organizations. Primarily because as you scale and grow an organization, it becomes more and more challenging to control the workforce, right? If you have a team of 10, it's a lot easier to kind of control what the group is doing versus a team of 10,000. And so oftentimes when companies scale, what they end up doing is most of their decisions are based from a place of fear. The what if our employees do X? And it's always, what if they steal from us? What if they take advantage of us? What if they don't work? What if they, all of these what ifs of negatives. And because of that, they put in a tremendous amount of bureaucracy and red tape and controls to, as we've talked about many times on the podcast, manage to the lowest common denominator. And they may say they want, and they really do, I think they really do want creative thinkers. But when you're in a situation where you have to manage to the lowest common denominator, it's hard to do that without putting in a set of very rigid and stringent controls for how that operates. I think the second part of that conversation, which isn't a separate notion, I think plays into that, is lack of clarity around the values of the company. And by that, I mean that um, it's hard to give employees autonomy to work within a set of bounds if they're never given the boundaries. And I think that really is a huge part of the problem. Okay, hold on. I gotta go tell him to stop raging out.
Okay.
He's learning keyboarding, and he's playing a Frogger style game to learn the keys. And when he gets hit by a truck, You can hear the result.
Nice, nice.
It's awesome though for at 6 to be learning keyboarding. He's going to be better than I am. I think when I really focused on it, I topped out at 124 words a minute, my
Mhm.
typing speed, which I was
Nice.
quite impressed with myself for.
I took keyboarding, I think it was junior year of high school as an elective.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was probably the best thing I did in high school because it's a skill I use to this day,
Yeah.
25 years later. Um, and I would recommend that to anybody taking because it was an electronic typewriter, and we
Same.
at times we actually had the thing covering the keys so we couldn't look down, and it was this older woman, and she would just walk up and down the aisles. I think I may have mentioned it before, like in early episodes,
I think we
and it'd
may
be
have
like,
been in the same class.
yeah, E space, E space, capital E space, doing
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
but I'll tell you this, it's a skill I use to this day
Oh
and
yeah.
can actually type without looking at the keyboard.
Yeah. So it's
Mm.
awesome that he's learning. So and combining that with him learning how to spell. Um I'm looking forward to that because he plays a lot of games on Roblox, and he tries his hardest to search for things based on how he's spelling it. And sometimes he does a good job and sometimes he doesn't. So he's always like, you got to come in here and spell this. So anyway, he's learning a ton. And it's good stuff. So uh, shifting back to where I was, it's really hard for employees. And when we say think creatively, what we aren't saying is just go do whatever. And I think that that's a big misconception. When we want people to be creative, when we want employees to be creative, we're not saying be completely outside the bounds. We're saying, at least what I'm saying, at least from my perspective, what I see the most healthy companies doing is saying, here's how we operate, here's our morals, here's our ethics. Within that sphere, you have full autonomy to be creative, to figure out how you want to get to an answer. To me, that's where the power is. And I think the disconnect is that companies, when they think about creativity or allowing employees that autonomy, think, well, we can't trust them to do that. And again, a big part of that is culturally, do we operate out of a place of fear? And managerial and leadership perspective, it's probably dictating that we haven't done a good enough job of helping our team understand why we're in business. What is our purpose? What are our morals? What are our ethics? Because if we had done a good enough job, then we should trust that the people we hire will find solutions and be creative within those boundaries that we've set for them.
So I mean, I could take that two different ways. It's either, the company hasn't put thought together on what it means to be creative and innovative within the company and bring new ideas, or it's a bait and switch. We're telling you during the interview process, the candidate evaluation process, or even just marketing to make ourselves look like a cool place to work and buy products from, but we're really not that way.
For sure that happens. I think that probably happens at lots of companies at lots of levels where there's a sense of window dressing that has to be put out there. For sure that's happening. But I think that's more of an amplifier than the core root of the problem. Again, I think the core root of the problem lies in really understanding why we do what we do and what our boundaries are, and then having the trust in our employees to have the autonomy to operate within them. Everything else is kind of a reflection of that lack of clarity around our role and why we ultimately are doing what we do. I wish I had the specific case study, but back when I worked at Spark Networks, uh, I want to say once a month we had a voluntary leadership group, which I think most people in the organization could choose to attend, where we would, prior to the meeting, would study some material, a case study, an article, or whatnot, and then we would come to the meeting to discuss our findings and what we thought. And one of them that it sticks with me, although the details are fuzzy, is this example of a company that ran on autonomy. And the case study was really about this company being incredibly transparent and clear on what their morals and their ethics were, and then allowing their employees to make decisions on their own that aligned with that. And the reason why I think this resonated with us, because a big component of our business, we had a call center supporting our customers, and we studied so many different examples of call centers, and I'm sure we've all seen it, where you talk to a call center rep and you can tell they have zero autonomy, zero authority to do anything other than read a script. And there probably has been a few outliers in your experience where you've talked to someone in a call center where you're like, wait a minute, this person really is trying to understand my problem, and it's clear that they have some freedom to help me solve my solution. And it was that latter scenario we were studying, and to understand how it works. And the CEO of the company said something like, um, I didn't have to do much other than to say, this is what we believe in, and I trust you to make decisions to support that model or that set of beliefs. And it was such a strong statement to me, and so simple yet powerful, that really that is how you can build a scalable organization where you allow your employees to be autonomous, but you have a set of controls to make sure they're autonomous within the culture that you are trying to create in your company. And it's always that example has always stuck with me.
Yep. And Tim Ferriss has a section in his book 4 Hour Work Week, because that's what, very similarly, that always stuck out to me about it, where he was talking about how he outsourced his call center for like one of the first products he had sold and had an e-commerce site for. And he had found that there was constantly things being escalated and stuff that he's like, when he started looking at it broadly, he's like, these are things that could easily be solved by the call center rep. But when he dug deeper, he found like that they didn't have the autonomy, and in fact had like a very low threshold for which they could help. I think it was like something like $25. Anything over $25 to help make the customer happy, they had to get approval for. And he bumped it up, and I can't remember the exact amount. It's been years since I read it. I want to say it was like maybe 75 to $100. He bumped up the threshold to say like anything within this range to make sure you make this customer happy. And if you make them happy, odds are they're going to come back and purchase, whether it's they were unhappy with the product or there was a shipping issue, anything to help, rectify the issue. And he said, from his side, the escalation stopped. Customers were happy. He found that for most agents weren't going up to the maximum amount of $100. Maybe it went up to like $50 was the average amount or whatever being used to make customers happy, or the normal amount. And sales slowly peaked up because people were able to have their problems resolved very easily. And he goes like, when you really look back at it, that's what it is giving them a bit more control over how to make a customer happy.
And again, it seems so clear, but unless you can get to a point where you can let go of this need to operate from a place of fear, and I think that often comes from a place of mistrust, until you can get over that, it is so difficult to adopt this. But having seen it work in numerous places, it just seems like a no-brainer, and everybody wins in the scenario. The employees are happier. I mean, as an employee, just think how amazing um, it must make you feel to have that trust that I have these bounds that I can work in and take care of the clients. And they have to feel so much more job satisfaction and feel like they're a much more trusted member of the team. So their happiness goes up. And when their happiness goes up, and they feel like they have the ability to help the company, they're much more willing to go out of their way to do things that is going to benefit the company, right? And the company sees huge benefits from that, which is counter to what they see today, where there's a lot of frustration. They're like, well, why isn't this employee like doing more? It's like, well, you're stifling any kind of motivation that they would have to do more. So you want them to do more, but you're not giving them an environment where they feel good to do more. And the customer wins, right? Just again, keeping with the call center example, it is such a night and day difference in experience as a customer when you're dealing with an agent that you know is trusted by the company to take care of you versus when you're dealing with an agent that you know they have zero autonomy and all they can do is follow a script. It's night and day difference, the positivity of that experience that you're having with that company. So everyone wins in that scenario, yet it's so hard for most companies to adopt because the problem of operating from a place of mistrust is never recognized and never solved for.
So we've been talking about employers, making sure that employees know what it means within the company to be innovative or be creative, bring new ideas to the table, challenge the corporate norms. Um, what can employees do? Because it is sometimes like walking a tightrope, especially trying to figure out like if the company that you're working for isn't proactive in this, trying to find out where your boundaries are, again, without easily being labeled as a troublemaker.
Again, I think it comes down to what your motivation is and what your focus is. And I'm going to keep coming back to this concept of having clarity around the bounds that we work in. That to me is where this needs to be addressed, because as a company, if we've set this is what we believe in, this is our purpose, this is our role, these are our beliefs. If you've set that and people are operating outside of that, yeah, it is a problem, right? And I think it's very healthy and okay to have that conversation of this is not in alignment with who we are. It's when that happens within a set of boundaries where it's not clearly defined is where the problem is. And again, I think it's all too unfortunate that employees that truly do want to do what's best for the company, truly do want to do what's best for the customer, are labeled as troublemakers, not because what they're doing is creating negative experiences, but what they're doing doesn't have a set of boundaries to align it against, to say, are they operating within what we want to be creating, the experiences we want to be creating. And that's really unfortunate, because I think many times those employees are unfairly labeled as such, when the problem isn't the employee, the problem is the leadership has failed to define the playground that we're playing on. And to go back to, was it last week where we started to layer in some sports analogies? You can look at this from a sports lens. So, you know, you can say, let's say we have an NBA basketball team. There's a set of boundaries that define this is how the game works. But within that, a coach has the ability to say, here's the game plan, and you're going to be 100% stringent to what I dictate. Or a coach can say, here's my goal, and here's our beliefs as a team. I'm going to give you autonomy to operate within that, as long as you don't violate kind of our beliefs. There's still boundaries, right? Like you can't play basketball like an NFL player. You can't go and tackle people and hold and throw them to the ground. So there's always a set of boundaries that you have to operate within, and you can be incredibly creative within that. But if you don't understand what those boundaries are, then I can't imagine how incredibly difficult it would be for an employee to push those boundaries, because if they do, you never know. Like, I have no idea where the boundary is. So one day I could be labeled a superstar for being creative and thinking outside the box, and the next day I could be labeled um, as a reckless bull in a china shop that doesn't care, and nothing has changed. But I have no idea that I just stepped over an imaginary line that no one told me ever existed.
Now you made me think of something using the sports analogy. Um, and by the way, we are going to have a series of episodes coming up soon on what the business world can learn from sports. That being said, we've talked so far about maybe people who are creative and cause trouble when they don't necessarily want to. But when does an employee, or I keep saying employee, but like when does a person as part of an organization cross that line and become like a true troublemaker within an organization?
Again, I'm going to go back to like a shared set of beliefs, and when we there's a few episodes ago where we really started to dive into some of the components of the Cowboy Code, and thank you for sending me the book, by the way. Um, Once employees start going outside that shared set of beliefs is when it becomes problematic, and I think that's true for every organization. And again, if we haven't, as a leadership team, done a good enough job of helping the organization understand what those shared set of beliefs are, then that failure of people stepping outside of that is on us. If we've done a good enough job in clearly defining what those shared beliefs are, then the employee has to share in that blame of stepping outside those bounds. And really this needs to start as far upstream as possible. And back to your question or statement around, how much of this is positioning or kind of bravado and hiring and trying to impress. Yeah, I think that unfortunately sets some misaligned expectations from the very beginning. You said one thing, now I'm hired, and now you're saying something else. And so I really think the onus needs to be on recruiters and organizations to be much more transparent in who they really are and be comfortable in being transparent in what they are and what they believe in. And that's scary for organizations because they think, it's going to turn people off. And it does. But it also attracts people where they're in alignment with what you do, your purpose, your reason for existing. And so I really think this needs to start before employees are ever hired. This needs to start in how companies talk about what they do, why they do it, their role in the world, and it needs to continue through the hiring process. Get rid of this idea that you're trying to, put on a, what is the term, dog and pony show, to try to convince employees that you're the right place. Just be who you are. Be authentic. And will it turn people off? Yeah. But it's going to turn the people off that are not a good fit for how you operate. So why not figure that out before you even hire them? Because if you're going to do this, you called it a bait and switch, you're setting everybody up for failure because you're saying one thing, you bring an employee onto the team, and now you hold them to a completely different standard than you set publicly and through the hiring process. And that's 100% on leadership.
So one more thing to start wrapping us up on, for this topic. And I think we may have touched on it briefly in the beginning. And I know we've touched on it here and there, over over the course of this podcast. But the thing that everybody has heard, this is the way we've always done it. And that in this case being used as a tool to prevent change, squash new ideas or whatever. Why is that something people trot out?
It's comfortable. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, but by nature, humans are, um, I don't want to say we reject change, but change makes us uncomfortable. It puts us in a spot where we're uneasy. And so if we can try to keep things the way they always are, then we at least kind of trick ourselves mentally to feel like we're more comfortable. But it's so far from reality that if we buy into that notion, we're setting ourselves up to go down a path that is 100% of the time going to end in failure. And we can abstract this to the larger kind of business world, and then we can bring it down to how companies think about how they manage their teams. Um, but we see this all the time as industries change. You know, right now we're in this kind of slowly moving pivot away from being a manufacturing giant to being having industries of knowledge and of the brain. Um, and yet you have people clinging onto it, and not only people, you know, here in Utah we have a lot of rural communities that are built around mining and gas production, and um, they want to cling to the way it's always been. You know, like this is the way it's always been. You know, the boys go to work in the oil field, and we have this quaint main street, and we want to cling on to that. I'm like, but you can't, because everything is always changing. In Buddhism, there's a concept that the only thing that is consistent is impermanence, meaning nothing is permanent. Everything is always in a constant state of change, and we're fooling ourselves to think that we can cling on to the status quo, because it's a phantom, it's a ghost, it's not really there. Everything is constantly changing, but again, it's our default state because change is scary to us. um but the healthiest organizations, the healthiest people realize that none of this is permanent. Things are constantly changing, and I have to be open to that change in order to move. See, she agrees. You're on mute.
Yeah, so the dog scared the crap out of me because just as that's happening, this little spider starts to dangle down in front of me. There we go.
The dog sensed the spider.
Yeah, the timing couldn't have been better because she barked. The spider's here right in front of me. It's like, oh shit.
which by the way brings up something that I've started to see talk about more and more on social media, and something that we talked about 18 months or so ago, that may be worth revisiting on the podcast, is this, you know, speaking of trying to keep things the way they are, is this need or belief that we have to keep a sterile work environment remotely, and the stress and anguish that people go through trying to keep the kids quiet or the background perfect, or and it's just not healthy. And in fact, to me, what makes people feel more human and more relatable is when they let that guard down, and you know, you see the kids run through the background, you see that their background isn't, you know, this nicely curated bookshelf. Like, to me, that's the amazing part of it.
But
Anyway.
it's funny you bring that up because, you know, my office is in the finished basement, but walking through the finished basement is to the back door where the cars are. So this morning I'm on the phone with Hila as my wife and son are leaving to go to my in-laws house for a visit. And as he's walking by, he yells real loud, "Bye, Daddy." So of course, you know, overhears that. And then about an hour ago, I was interviewing somebody, just as they got home, and he runs in, "Hi, Daddy," and she starts laughing. On the other hand, I'm like, "I'm sorry, my wife and son just got home." She goes, "No, no, no, it's awesome."
Yeah, it really
Um,
is. It really
you
is
know,
awesome.
it's funny because I remember when I first started working remote 100%, like I wanted to make sure the background, there was no background noise. You know, I don't, you know, and we were at my in-laws' shore house, and at the time, my wife and my in-laws were paying a local landscaper to come and trim the lawn like once every other week. And I'm on the phone with a client, and they show up, the windows are open, so the lawnmower's going, and here I am with my laptop running to different spots in the house, so you wouldn't overhear the lawn work being done outside.
It's
And now
stressful,
at this
right?
point,
It's
it is,
stressful.
it is. And you know what? Like I've gotten comfortable with
You
it.
just got to roll with it, and I do think it would be a fun future discussion. I was on a call, and apologize, we're going on a completely different tangent here, but we'll circle it back. I was on a call with a client a couple weeks ago, and she lives in a condo in Miami, and they were doing some maintenance on the building, and she's like, "Can you hear that hammering?" I'm like, "Faintly every now and then," but she was so focused on the noise they were making and trying to mute and unmute that she wasn't present in the conversation. Like, I'm like, we might as well reschedule this call because you can't focus on the conversation because you're so worried about me hearing a little hammer noise in the background. Like, let it go. It doesn't matter. This is fine. This is,
Yeah.
we're not working in sterile labs here. Like, it's assumed that stuff happens all the time. And it's weird because it happens all the time in the office. Yet in the office, we feel more comfortable with there being office noise, but we're uncomfortable with there being home noise.
Well, so
It's
you
weird.
actually gave me a great way to kind of tie this all up in a bow. Is one of the things I said to kind of intro the topic is it goes back to our school days, and um yeah, with school, kind of like everybody stand in line, everybody get in line, everybody sit at their desks, and it's quiet time. It's this, and now, granted, you need some of that to manage a room full of children, but that way too is, I get it, it's something where we're trained from those early days that if we're not in a formal environment with these formal rules of everybody sits in their place, the places are all in line, and everybody's quiet, and whatnot, that we're not actually being productive. We're not learning. We're not doing our work, whatever that is.
I agree, and again, that concept of compliance overrides. But again, that's not how the real world. It's messy, it's noisy, it's everybody operates in different ways, and we need to get outside of that sense of trying to curate this environment that we think that everyone needs to be in to work. We
Mhm.
need to face a new reality of the way things are. So
Yeah. Cool. Well,
anyway,
this was fun.
yeah, it's a
This
good
was a
a
lot of
good
fun.
a good conversation. And by
Yeah.
the way, and I don't want to overload him, but and I don't know why he's so popular, but people every once in a while are pinging me. So is John coming back? Is John going to
Yeah.
make an
I got
appearance
to
back
talk
on
to him
the
about that so we can
podcast?
start coordinating schedules.
Yeah, you gotta please the fans. Give them
Yeah.
what they want, I guess.
Yeah. So I do need to talk to him about that and coordinate a time for him as well.
That'd be fun.
Cool.
Would be fun. All right.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up for now and talk to everybody later.
See you.